Over the last couple of decades, there have been many chefs who have helped expand the notion of Asian American food, and I'm so excited to welcome two of them here today. First, you'll be hearing from CLAU, who's a New York-based chef and culinary consultant whose Chinese American cuisine is influenced by the multicultural communities of Oakland and the Bay Area in California, where she was raised by parents who emigrated from Hong Kong, and in New York City, where she lives. In August 2020, just a few months into the pandemic, Christine opened Kimika in New York, showcasing her take on Ida cuisine. Kimika was named a semifinalist for the 2022 James Beard Foundation Best New Restaurant Award. Her dishes have been featured in the New York Times, Eater, Food and Wine, and more. We also got Abby Balingit, a Filipino-American home baker and author based in Brooklyn. Her debut cookbook, Mayumu, Filipino-American Desserts Remix, was released in 2023. Her Treat Box series helps raise money for mutual aid organizations, and she's been featured in Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, Eater, Thrillist, Food 52, and more. We'll be having Q&A at the end, so please log into your Slido. If there's time, we'll be having Q&A at the end, so please feel free to populate Slido with questions, and I'll hand it off to Christine. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everybody. Someone's going to tell me if I'm talking too loud or not. I have this voice that carries in this way that I have no control over. Thanks for having me. Today we are going to, anybody have the tortellini and brodo yesterday at the World Market? Great, so we're gonna break that down today, all right? This dish is actually a dish I created at Kimika. I think Rupa gave you a little bit of an idea of the restaurant is an Italian-Japanese restaurant in Nolita. But I created this dish actually for a New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, New Year's Day special. And so I'm gonna give you a little history of where it came from. So in Japan, on Solar New Year's Day, it's basically the most important day of the year. A lot of family, you eat ozeki and you eat ozoni. And I learned about ozoni from a bunch of my friends who are Japanese, and I would somehow make my way over to their apartment, and we would always have some, it's a mochi soup, basically. So I did a little digging to figure out, okay, how can I do a version of ozoni on the menu that was appropriate at Kimika? And then I also have a handful of Italian friends. I cooked Italian for 10 years, so that's kind of by osmosis, I learned a lot of that culture. And a handful of them were like, well, we eat tortellini and brodo at our house. So it was broth and broth. This was like a natural meeting of the minds. So how are we gonna do this? So we did a little bit of research on ozoni. So there's definitely mochi in there. In different regions, different styles of broths, very classic, right? Different regions in any country. And then classic tortellini and brodo from the Emilia-Romagna region, pork, cheese, parm broth, and brodo. So I wanted to kind of make it mine, right? Or Kimika's at that point. And I come from a Cantonese American background. My family's from Hong Kong. And my favorite thing to eat in the entire world, like anybody ever ask you that, what's that one dish you want to eat for the rest of your life? Mine is Hong Kong style wonton noodle soup. And I can tell you exactly which spot and which place to eat at in Hong Kong, if you want. However, I mean, everyone has their own opinion. So that's kind of where it all started. So it's like, okay, I get to make a dumpling or a wonton type shape. I want broth, and how can we make it appropriate for New Year's Day? So we're gonna start with the actual tortellini itself. So we're gonna do a classic Hong Kong style wonton is pork and shrimp. So here we're taking the pork and we're switching it with prosciutto, and then we're adding shrimp, and then we're adding a little mascarpone instead of ricotta to make it super smooth. All right. So here we have ground prosciutto, and to be honest, in the restaurant we had the butts, so scraps, so no waste. So we're making our money back from using all the parts of the prosciutto. So we have that. We have a little bit of sugar, a little bit of mushroom powder, a little bit of white pepper is the seasoning. And the mushroom powder is kind of like my general alternative from MSG. I'm not necessarily anti-MSG, it's just kind of something that I've grown accustomed to using. And this one, there are different versions of mushroom powder that have MSG and they don't. I prefer this brand here. Anybody want this one? But we're gonna back it up a little bit and talk about the shrimp technique. So here I have whole shrimp that have been peeled and deveined. And one of the techniques we do here is to make the filling, I'm actually using a shumai technique. Everybody's familiar with that dim sum dish, right? It is pork and shrimp, classically as well in Hong Kong style dim sum. There's obviously versions that will take out the shrimp in that, and even like beef to that. But so I wanted to get the texture of the shrimp and how do we incorporate it. And so one of the versions that we do, you want to get this kind of like crispy, crunchy texture from the shrimp, but you don't want to overcook it either, right? So this is kind of like the classic dim sum style of doing it. Some versions where you'll use baking soda instead, but this is like an all natural version that I found. And so I've cleaned and peeled and deveined the shrimp. I've cut them into smaller pieces, and I actually rinse it really hard with under running water, cold water, like as hard as you can get, for about 10 minutes until it turns really opaque. And you're kind of sealing the rest of the moisture and that texture in. So that's the shrimp basis of it. So we've broken it down to like a dim sum root as well. So we're gonna add the prosciutto into the mixture. And then we're gonna add the seasonings. So we've got sugar, mushroom powder, and ground white pepper. Right, the holy trinity in Chinese food is really salt, sugar, MSG. So we've got the salt in the prosciutto already, sugar, and I'm using the mushroom powder instead of the MSG. All right, and then we're gonna add the shrimp in, the rinse and wash shrimp into the bowl, and then we're gonna using the KitchenAid instead of, we're mimicking what is a handmade process where you're basically whipping with your hand and throwing it to get this almost elastic texture to it where it comes together. So we're gonna really whip this very hard until it actually starts, it's like you're making an emulsion, but you don't wanna over whip it because you wanna still have chunks of shrimp, right? So I haven't ground the shrimp or pulse the shrimp on purpose. So some tortellinis will have more than others. Again, kind of like a shumai and wonton aspect. And then at the end, you just fold in very lightly the mascarpone, just to get it emulsified. Just to get it like you could do with like a spatula if you weren't using a mixer. And the end of it is this filling here. You can see little bits of shrimp in here. I don't know if you can see it. So you have these like little parcels of gray within the pink. And so from there, we're gonna make some tortellini. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the wrapper here and the choice of wrapper. One, I've done this in more than one variation where I've made the pasta myself, but in this scenario, I have chosen to use a wrapper that we're buying, but this is a Hong Kong style yellow skin wrapper. So if you see, it's very thin. So that's the style of Hong Kong style shumai and wontons, all right? So not the thicker ones and the yellow. And the yellow doesn't actually come from egg, it comes from the alkaline. So similar to the ramen noodles where you're getting that texture. And basically the people that were making those style of alkaline noodles are making the wrappers, right? So you make one dough, how many different things can you make out of it? So we're doing, I'm taking a round wrapper instead of like, let's say a square wrapper here. I don't know, I just like the shape. You could do it with a square wrapper, but so we're gonna fold it, get all the air out, and we're gonna seal it with just a little bit of water. So we've got a half moon or mezzaluna. And what I was saying to everybody, when all the students would help me fold yesterday, we're gonna make a little belly button with your middle finger. So you're gonna crease this little here, and then you're gonna fold it around, kind of like you're wrapping a sweatshirt around your waist. So you get this round texture, or round shape. And then because the skins are so thin, just for the restaurant, you can boil these. But we at the restaurant decided to steam them just because they're a little finicky. So we're gonna throw these in the steamer. There is a paper on here so they don't stick to the bamboo steamer, and it's been sprayed a little bit with just nonstick spray to make sure you can get that off. All right, so while those are steaming, we're gonna make the brodo. I believe on the recipe I called it a soy brodo, and it is that. But the choice of brodo when I was creating that New Year's dish was that there are different styles. There's a miso-based zozoni or there's a soy-based zozoni. And so the wonton soup, if you remember that, and tortellini brodo is very clear capon, or parm broth. So we definitely didn't want to do the miso. But so I read a little bit about what kind of broths in the Ozoni area, and the Kanto brodo comes from the Tokyo area, but it was Kanto with a K, right? So then we're moving back to this history of China and Japan, right? And we're not going to do that. That's a whole nother talk, right? But there's so much history there that honestly, even at Kamika, I was able to just draw so much lineage to my background and my flavor profiles that I wanted to cook with. It was very natural. You know, history has created that already for us, right? So can we bring it back out to the modern day world and re-represent it or represent it? So this is water. I've got a little bit of this secret ingredient that I really like to use. It's this nakombu extract that you can get from Mutual Trading Company. All right. Yep. And we've got white soy. We've got uzukuchi soy, also known as light soy. We've got sake. We have got mushroom powder again. A little salt. So we're going to turn this on and make that boil. All right. Did I turn on the wrong thing?
Oh. Is it on?
No.
No, you got it. There you go.
So that's the broth. And then we're going to add also something that I really enjoyed because I did cook a little bit of ramen for a while. And Tokyo style ramen is like when you add it, everybody ever been to a ramen shop with like add $1, you get a little butter in there, whether it's soy or miso. So that was also really fun for me. So in my second version of this dish, actually, I turned it kind of into a spring dish. I made it was ramp season. So ramps are like the biggest hoopla, especially in the East Coast, because there's nothing going on in the winter. So we made a ramp butter. So here we've made a garlic chive butter here. Everyone's familiar with garlic chives? So chop or the ramps, salt, so you're wilting. Then we add softened butter, bonito flakes to give it a little bit. So then now I'm adding back into that concept of dashi. We've got kombu here, and then I'm adding the bonito in there, and then a little bit of fennel pollen to give it some brightness. So we've got a little garlic chive butter that we made yesterday. So that's gonna go at the base of the bowl. And then we're talking about the garnishes now? Great. So we're gonna put the garlic chive butter at the bottom of the bowl. Why in the bottom of the bowl? Because, well, we did a little tableside pour. So it's kind of fun when you pour the broth tableside, then all of a sudden the broth turns green, or when you're mixing around for your next moments. And so we are going to garnish, add the tortellini to the bottom of the bowl. So see, we've got the 5 steamed tortellini here. We're just gonna kind of place them all around. One in the middle. And then, what makes it an ozoni as well is the rice cake, right? So I use this Korean style rice cake here. And I'm obsessed with this texture of fried and rehydrated, all right? So what I've done is I've taken these rice cakes and I've fried them. So then you get this kind of squishy texture again. Think about it from tortilla soup. Or even chicharrones and salsa verde. That texture is something I'm completely obsessed with. So we've fried these. So then you're going to get that rehydrated texture. So each tortellini gets 2 mochi because who doesn't want more chewy, crunchy things? And it's the key to this ozoni. And so we're going to put those in. And then we are going to add a little bit of vegetables. So here we've got yu choy. Right, so classically in the ozoni, you'll have the mochi, you'll have soup, you'll have yu choy or komatsuna or some sort of Japanese mustard green of such. So a little bit of that here. I've done a bunch of variations with this. Like I was saying, I turned it into a spring dish. So I've done it with all spring vegetables, carrots, peas, sugar snaps, all of those things. And then we're gonna add another key component to the ozoni is Naruto. Everybody familiar with that anime? But so this is an actual Naruto. It's just fish cake, but this is the one, all right? I actually learned that the pink on the outside was not the classic one. So each tortellini gets a piece of fish cake.
Chef, is the yu choy raw or is it blanched?
It's blanched. And we are gonna add a little bit of scallions, because who doesn't like scallions in their broth? We're going back to that Hong Kong style wonton dish. And tortellini and brodo, you need a little cheese, right? So we're gonna do a little grated parm on there. Thanks for grating that. And we're gonna finish with a little bit of white pepper to really make that, we had a little cracked fresh black pepper, but that's really a key to the Hong Kong style flavor. And this broth is ready. So the last component to the broth is we add, very classic to this Tokyo style, and these soy brodos or broths, is a little bit of acid. So you could do sudachi, you could do, or you can even, also in the Chinese style, we use dried orange peel. I went yuzu, so I'm adding a little bit of yuzu juice and a little bit of yuzu peel. And it's pretty cool because we don't get a lot of fresh yuzu out in the East Coast either. And then we're gonna add the broth just right on top. When you wanna add the acid in at the end so you don't kill it, right? And then that hot broth is gonna melt that garlic chive butter that you have underneath the tortellini. So then when you are grabbing a spoon for it, you're like, ooh, what's this surprise? And then we're gonna add a little World of Flavors surprise. It's not on there because we weren't sure if we could get the matsutakes, but it is beautiful matsutake season, so we're just gonna shave a little bit on top. And really let that permeate right into the broth. So that is the shrimp and prosciutto tortellini and brodo.
We can do a little bit more Q&A at the end, but before, I would love to hear a little bit about how do you talk about this dish? How do you tell people? I know it was for New Year's, so I know it was a special occasion. How do you describe it?
I describe it as comfort in a bowl because there's not a day in my life that I don't want broth. I mean, even after yesterday's marketplace, I think a couple of friends and I went out to dinner and we're like, man, I should have taken a quart of that broth home, and sipped on it. I think it's definitely comfort in a bowl. It's a little finessed, do you know what I mean? And I hope you leave eating one of them, or there's only 5, and you want like another bowl, So I think of it as really this is really kind of like me in a bowl in some ways, right? I cooked Italian for the first 10 years of my career. I went then I went Japanese. On like really broth work there with the ramen shop and things of such. And then being able to kind of loop back around all those years later and to be able to really put my voice as a Cantonese American and really trying to be able to have that voice it's really kind of beautiful. I've been cooking for a really long time and I wasn't sure if we were ever gonna get here. So it's really a true honor to be able to have this conversation and be a part of the dialogue here.
Abby, would you like to go ahead?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hello. Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Abby Balingit. I'm going to be doing some Filipino classic desserts with a Filipino-American twist. So this genre of rice cakes is called kakanin. And it's really great because it's one of those things that is like, a lot of the recipes are pre-colonial. And you'll notice here that we're gonna be using a lot of coconut milk and a lot of rice. And so like that is the main ingredient for the strawberry shortcake sapin. And later we're gonna be doing a Thai tea cuchinta. But to focus first on the strawberry shortcake sapin. Sapin means layers or layered. And the traditional sapin actually has like a layer of bright purple, which is ube, purple yam, which is taken off in the mainstream media and everything. And the middle is just like regular coconut. And then also there's a yellow layer that is jackfruit. So the fun thing about kind of being from San Jose, from Stockton, I grew up here in California. I always like to think that like my best memories are from my childhood. And so I was thinking of those strawberry shortcakes that you get, like the ice cream bars with like the cake on the top and the crumbs of strawberry. So I definitely wanted to kind of interpret those flavors into sapin. And so we are gonna go ahead and make a strawberry layer, a vanilla layer, and also a layer that is molasses, a little bit of cinnamon. And so we're just gonna evoke the flavors of strawberry shortcake. And so I'm gonna go ahead and start off with, we had glutinous rice flour, regular rice flour, and coconut milk all in these bowls, and I separate them out equally into 3 portions. And so here we're gonna go ahead and start with some strawberry preserve. And I also will bump this up soon with some red food coloring, just because I like that classic kind of pink, vibrant color. And so we're gonna, yeah, you can see it's a little bit dull. It looks like Yoplait. I prefer a little bump. And so try to go light with red gel food coloring. I love using red gel, just gel food coloring in general, because a lot of the times like using liquid food coloring can kind of dilute your mixture a bit, and with mixtures and consistency, you kind of want something that is less liquidy, so your actual form is relatively the same as before. And so this is going to be added with like a little vanilla extract in the vanilla bowl. Okay, and then we're just going to mix that up too. These whisks are a danger. I'm going to just like go ahead and whisk this away from the other whisks. And you just want this to be all consistent and uniform. And then last but not least, we have like this robust molasses and ground cinnamon. And so we're gonna add this in. And I don't think it's very traditional, honestly, to your classic strawberry shortcake, but I did want kind of like that color contrast and also flavor contrast in with this layer. Sorry, this robust molasses got all over me. So, okay, we got this all mixed together. Okay, and so we're gonna go ahead and get this to a nice caramel color, and everything should be consistent. Okay, and I'm gonna remove the whisks and put them and throw them into the sink. Oh, never mind here. And so I'm gonna go ahead and start with a bottom layer of strawberry. And so I'm gonna go ahead and pull the steamer lid. And I've already brushed these molds with some coconut oil for like ease to remove it later. And each bottom layer gets a tablespoon of the strawberry preserve mixture. And I'm gonna go ahead and use another spoon to kind of go for this. And you're just gonna go ahead and line the bottom here. And once you're done steaming and unmolding, that will be actually the top of your dessert. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and clean that one off. And in theory, it's gonna take 5 minutes to completely steam the first layer. And the reason why you wanna do everything kind of in parts is that if you're gonna go ahead and try to put all the flavors all at once, it's all just gonna seep together into this kind of tie-dye mosaic, which you don't want. You definitely want distinct layers. And so we had a preset version that was already steamed properly. So if you see this has kind of been chilled a little, but it is kind of firm enough where you can kind of poke it and nothing is gonna seep through. And that's exactly what you want when you're done steaming. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of show like what it looks like with this next layer. Oh, thank you, Chef. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put it into this already pre-steamed strawberry layer over here. Okay, and then I'm gonna go put this in the bain-marie as well. Sorry for the mess. And we're gonna have the last final layer, after equally another 5 minutes. You go ahead and clean this off. So yeah, so each layer is just coming in hot. Thank you so much. Okay, and so it's over this fully steamed portion here. Okay, and I think we're just gonna close the lid and I can show you kind of the final product. Okay, over here. Thank you, Chef. So once you're all done and you've actually like taken all of the fully filled molds, you can go ahead and use your offset spatula. And I like to kind of put this in a hot water bath or so to kind of like loosen up the actual sapin. But you go ahead and kind of line it around. And then the coconut oil should help it not stick to the actual mold. And then you should have like this very sticky mochi-like dessert after you're done. And then I also go ahead and like kind of put this on banana leaves. And it's traditionally served on banana leaves because if you try to like serve it on anything else, it'll kind of just like stick to the surface. And it's also really great that, banana leaves are very much native to like the Philippines. And so it's actually like an eco-friendly way to kind of not just use like wax paper or anything else that you're trying to serve desserts in. And my other kind of favorite like Filipino dessert parlor trick is that we love to use this toasted coconut curd recipe called latik. And so latik is basically all coconut cream, and you boil it and you boil it and you boil it, and then you have to like cook it for about an hour, 25 minutes for a full size amount, and then it basically separates, and then it separates into these curds that are browned, and you can actually just see that it's like kind of a crumbly texture. And the oil that you see in the pot is just all coconut oil that happens when you separate out the curds and the oil, and the curds are just frying in that oil. So it's a nice toasted and like very delicious kind of flavor, but it is very time consuming. And I always feel like when I was watching my mom kind of like making a lot of Filipino desserts as a kid, it's always just like me as her sous chef just like stirring a pot. And I do think that is a very like real experience for a lot of us like Southeast Asians, just like making stews and everything else. So I love to have like latik on hand, especially for sapin, where it's very much a tenet of the dessert. But also just reminds me of those like cake crumbs on top of the shortcake bars. So I'm gonna go ahead and just like garnish it with a bit of the latik, and then also add freeze-dried strawberry powder to kind of bump up that strawberry flavor. And another great thing about this dessert is that it's gluten-free. So it's great for anyone who has any sensitivities to gluten. And we have also fresh flowers, so that was a nice touch that you don't always have to do, but it is really nice for this kind of setting. I'm just gonna go ahead and garnish the rest of these. But it is really nice to kind of have this like a recipe around, because I think growing up, I would just go to the store with my parents and I'd be like, oh, I know this by sight, and I know like this is exactly what I like to enjoy for like a family party or a fiesta, but actually making it was kind of a mystery to me. And so like I'm like glad that you can honestly just customize the flavors the way that you would like to. And I guess that is like the joy of like the Filipino American and Asian American experience, is kind of the freedom to do that. So yeah, this is the strawberry shortcake sapin, and I think we're gonna move on to the Thai tea cuchinta. I'm going to go this way. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Alrighty. So for this dessert, I know this is a spoiler, but we have like the finished product here. And it is technically, cuchinta comes from kind of Hokkien origins. And so there was a lot of trade between like Chinese people and also immigration to the Philippines. And so you'll notice a lot of overlap in like Filipino cuisine and Chinese cuisine, like lumpia, and also like pancit, which is all rice noodles. So it's really great that this is another kind of exemplification of that, with the actual word coming from koi, chin tao, and koi is kind of like a bite-sized snack or cake dessert. So here we have Thai tea that is already been infused. So I boiled some Thai tea leaves and for about 10 minutes, and it's just been sitting in there. And then we also have tapioca flour, and this is regular all-purpose flour. And then we also have glutinous rice flour, and just a bunch of brown sugar here. And I think, okay, this is for garnishing. So this is freshly grated coconut and some condensed milk. And so for the traditional recipe, cuchinta honestly just uses brown sugar and then annatto seed for like the bright orange coloring. But for this, I was just thinking of, like water just being plain, that there's different ways you can incorporate more flavor into that. And I used to like grow up and go to a lot of like boba shops to hang out with like my friends. And I think like the second best flavor to me from like honeydew is also just like Thai tea, milk tea with boba. And so yeah, I wanted to kind of incorporate those flavors into like the sticky rice dessert. And we also have, sorry, I forgot this very important ingredient. This is lye water. And so because we're using lye water, which is a very caustic kind of solution, it's very alkaline, you have to make sure you wear gloves and don't touch it with your bare hands. And so it is kind of a little dangerous, but like please don't touch, like don't be mistaking that for plain water. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on these gloves. Okay, and so I'm gonna go ahead and start whisking away our flours. So here we go. So all three go in here. And so honestly, developing this recipe was a lot of trial and error of, what flours come together to make the structure that you want. And for this recipe, I like to think of like cuchinta as like giant bobas just because they're so chewy and gelatinous. And it's kind of like you want some structure from like the all-purpose flour, but you also want the stickiness of like the glutinous flour, and also tapioca starch is a thickener. And so it does give that very classic like pearl boba taste and also texture. And so here we're just gonna keep mixing this until it's uniform, basically uniform. But we're gonna go ahead and add this Thai tea that we had infused earlier. Thank you so much. And then also lye water. And so lye water is also commonly used. I think you can make pretzels also uses lye water because of the browning effect that it has. But most commonly, like ramen noodles also use lye water, and it has like the elasticity and like bounciness that you get with each chew is honestly mostly because of lye water. And so we're gonna go ahead and keep mixing this, and we're gonna go ahead and kind of transfer it over to a, there was a container. It's more so for easy pour into the molds. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take this and I'm gonna go ahead and grab the lid. Oh, thank you so much. I'm gonna transfer it here just for being able to pour it easier. Okay, I think most of the lumps are gone. Okay, I'm just gonna do a portion. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. So we're gonna go ahead and pour it into these molds, and it's about 3 tablespoons worth, similarly to like the full amount of the sapin. So you're just gonna fill to the top. And you'll be surprised after 25 to 30 minutes of steaming that they really do firm up quite a lot. And then we're just gonna go ahead and, that one is lopsided, so I don't wanna mess with that one. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put the lid back onto the steamer. Thank you. And so whenever they're done, you'll notice that the hue of the cuchinta are so much more vibrant and like very, very deep brown. And that's a combination of just like, again, like the lye water and the brown sugar that's in the actual recipe. And so it's a similar thing where you use the offset spatula, you pray a little bit, and then it all comes out quite easily. And so you go ahead and like unmold it, and it is really like a very gelatinous kind of flab, but it is very delicious. And like we usually serve it right side up like this. And here we have them all lined up very prettily. And I'm gonna go ahead and kind of garnish them. And so again, traditionally it's only grated coconut that you would use for this. But I really like kind of adding the condensed milk for extra sweetness, but also like it's aesthetically very beautiful to see like a drizzle on top. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And Chef Kate and the CIA kitchen was so nice to like get this 3-pronged like squeeze bottle, and you had to snip to get to the right whisk. So let's hope it works perfectly for us on stage. Okay, perfect. So here we go. And yeah, this is perfect for your next birthday party or family party, but it's very nostalgic for me to like make this on stage. And I used to just like go to like a Filipino bakery and just like look for that, and it reminds me of home, but to be able to make it for you all is such an honor. So thank you so much.
Do you guys want to join me down here for some Q&A? I will set up some chairs.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Please feel free to add questions into Slido. If you guys have questions you'd like to ask, I'll be checking that, and I can ask the chefs. Do you guys want to come down and join me up front?
Oh, we get chair.
Yeah, you can sit down.
I'm going to hang here like a weirdo.
This here.
And let me give you this microphone. Do all this, and I'll turn it off.
Okay.
Thank you both so much. That was such a fascinating demo. I would love to hear a little bit about sort of both of your dishes had, there's an approach to texture in both of your dishes that I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about. Something that we hear at CIA a lot, especially from the students and especially from the students in the pastry program, is that they really want to do more with QQ texture, with bouncy texture. They want to see more of that. That's really where things are going. So I'm sort of curious about both of your evolution in terms of like growing up with sort of bouncy texture, chewy texture, how you serve that to folks, how you get people to understand that that's sort of desirable. I know, like, I think generationally boba has become such a thing for young people that like it's almost not something you have to explain anymore. But I'm sort of curious how that's evolved for both of you over time. It should be on.
Do you want me to? Is this on?
Oh yeah. Oh, your mic's already still. So if you want to. Oh, great. I got this.
Am I talking to?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you should be good.
Am I good?
Yeah.
Well, I always really actually found the love for rice cakes actually from one of the last East Asian flavors that I learned to eat. It was Korean. You know, I grew up in Oakland, California, so and it was just like a little bit of a later immigration, I think, or I just wasn't exposed to it. And the rice cake work in Korean food was way better than what I was eating at home. And so I've always kind of like kept that on the back of my mind. And it was just a better product. It didn't taste so, I guess in some ways like ricey. It was just more about the chew. And actually in terms of how I've evolved in terms of adding texture into my food is that no one really talks about how much texture is important in food in general. You know, I think in our scenario we do, but I didn't realize how important it was until I started traveling a lot, and then I would just keep eating, and I was like, something is missing. And like having multiple textures, and it doesn't always mean crunch, right? It's not always crispy crunchy, it's more subtle. It's like this one has like a little bit of a squish, and this one has a little bit of a chew, this one has a snap, you know, and it took kind of traveling a lot and eating a lot of different textures, and it just kind of became, I think everybody else had to tell me that like, chef, you like a lot of texture in your food. I was like, I do? Because I was always this is a balanced dish. This is something that I learned how to make, 5 years ago or 2 years ago, or this is a really like now seasonal version of a dish. And I was like, but it's missing something. Like, yeah, you want something crunchy or you want something chewy, or, they almost kind of rolled their eyes at me. But I think it kind of leans back to the subtleness of Cantonese food. I think that's a really big journey that I'm hoping to be a part of, is to try to explain what is easily considered a simplicity of Cantonese food, but really it's very ingredient driven, and it's the nuanced, the small things that come out in the food. So I think texture is a really big part of that. There's like, it's not really heavily spiced in that capacity. It's not spicy forward. It's all about fresh ingredients and these little nuanced things like texture. So I think it's those little subtle things that really can possibly make a dish really memorable, because it's just this component that you aren't going to find, or it's like an element of surprise, So I'm hoping like in this tortellini dish, that little bit of crunch from that rehydrated texture, that it took me also years to define how I just explained it to you, that's the texture that I'm obsessed with, this fried rehydrated texture. It was all these dishes that I found that I enjoyed eating that was like, oh, I like that, like whole roasted pig, chicharron, tortilla soup, putting the big crunchies in an American style egg drop, it took a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the most popular Filipino desserts too is halo halo, and it literally means mix. And I think it's like such a nice thing to kind of like dig in with your spoon and have like crunchy shaved ice, but also just like the liquid evaporated milk and like chewy nata de coco, which is fermented coconut gel, and beans and ice cream. And so I think like I've always like grown up with like a maximalist mindset of like, I want everything all at once. And even though it's like, I know it's like a lot sometimes, but I swear like I try to make desserts that are very balanced. But I do appreciate like a sense of like Filipino-ness is like just so diverse in a sense of where our inspirations are coming from, and that just like it boils and leads down into texture too, where it's like I do like dishes that have all these components, but especially like not shying away from like stickiness and sliminess and chewiness, because I remember just growing up, my parents would be like, just try it once and see how you like it before saying anything, and like yucking my yum and whatever. And so I really think that spirit is like really important as like we keep moving forward and like teaching our kids and future generations how to eat and how to cook for themselves.
And I think that's really interesting too, because when you talk about the various blends of flours that you use, for example, it seems like you've calibrated each one very specifically for each dish. And I'm curious about When you talk to people about your food, and you do pop-ups and you do events, do you have to explain? Do you feel as though you have to explain? And has that changed? Sort of the expectation of what things were going to taste like, what the texture is going to be, how things are going to, how they might expect them. Have you had that experience that folks sort of know what they're getting when they have your sapin or something similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like sometimes it depends if you're a non-Filipino person versus like a Filipino person coming up to me, and I made something that has like fermented shrimp paste, which is called bagoong. I'm always like pleasantly surprised that people are, oh, I've had this before at a restaurant here in Brooklyn or Queens, and like it is humbling that I think Filipino food has had a moment for a very long time, and I think Asian American food has just, is one of those backbones of like American cuisine that I can like draw from in a way that everyone knows what Thai tea is also, so I don't have to explain like the flavors of like black tea and whatever else is in there. So I'm just excited that it is kind of, I don't have to explain myself as much, but I do sometimes have to explain like why this makes sense in this certain setting versus like breaking down each component individually.
That makes a lot of sense. I've got an audience question, which is a large one, so forgive me. But where do you see Asian American cuisine going in the next 5 to 10 years? How do you see this evolving? It's massive.
I give you the biggest question right
man.
here.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is a big one, but I think there's something interesting that's seated in it, where like, generationally, what we've seen over the years and how things have evolved thus far, I think, the acceptance, expectation of, and understanding of Asian American cuisines in lots of ways. Like, if you want to talk a little bit about, for example, at Chino Grande and how you've designed that menu and who's eating there. Like, I think that tells us a lot about sort of where it's going in some ways.
I mean, I definitely think that the Asian American, I call it the Asian American food movement, for a lack of a better title, or let's just create a title for it. I think it's here. I think it's a really, really, really exciting time. Like I was saying earlier, and it's really amazing to be able to be a part of it. I would say, as someone that's like a decent veteran in the business, and I think you can actually find it in a talk that I've done before, where I was like, I wasn't interested in necessarily, unfortunately, I probably said, I wasn't interested in opening a Chinese restaurant because it wasn't supported in the sense that there wasn't enough of us. There absolutely is a part in all ethnic foods that we have to kind of break down, like what is the true value, what is the true cost, right? That's a whole nother topic, but we can ignore it. And I, definitely talked about how that is, I wasn't interested in being the sole person trying to do that, let alone trying to figure out how to make, a successful business. It's really quite amazing how we've evolved in such a short period of time to be able to do that, and to be able to, right? I don't have to explain to everybody what is mochi.
Mm-hmm.
We just, that question you're just answering, or what is boba. I mean, there's, and obviously living in larger cities that helps, and very diverse cities. But I think there's this beautiful, I think the path for, I would say, Chinese food is, the path is to start to define what the different regionalities are. You know what I mean? We can say that to be the same as like, even in the Filipino food, there's a million different regions, in every kind of ethnic, every country basically. So I think that's a really cool path, and to be able to start that dialogue. And I think in terms of as a community, and as an industry, is like to be able to support each other, and to continue to do that. And I think there's also something to be said about different, while we're here as Asian Americans, but to be able to band with the Latino American, community, and the, the Indian American community, or however it's defined, because so much of the challenges are very similar, in the same way. So how can we learn from each other, and how can we push the movements all together? I guess that's kind of where it comes from for me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I also see like a kind of like a change of a lot of people that, can't have brick and mortar restaurants. I see so much. And as someone who also does pop-ups occasionally myself, it's nice to kind of see people, like one of my friends is like Woldy Reyes. I don't know if you've worked with him yet, but he's amazing. And he did like a Filipino Lebanese dinner at Eddie's Grocer in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. And it's cool to kind of see like the ways, like we were just talking about, of just fusion and kind of reclaiming that, because there's always like this icky sense of when people used to talk about fusion cuisine. But it's like when you're coming together with other members of different communities, and we're actually like learning so much by, putting our dishes and our minds into like one kind of cohesive unit. So I really do think like the future could just be us on the road on like a tour of all sorts of places and not having to just be grounded to New York and LA.
And I think there's some, oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, to follow up on that, and to kind of lean back into the original question is that, so at Chino Grande in Williamsburg, it's a Chinese Latino restaurant, right? In the same way that Kamika was Italian Japanese. I think a good way to kind of push all these movements or to educate is this, what I call connecting dots. All right, so you're connecting two different cultures through food. What we call food is a love language. Food is also the language for education. Do you know what I mean? And to introduce people to different cultures, right? We all eat food, so I think it's a really beautiful place to start from doing that. And I've found on a personal level a lot of joy doing that in a way of like even just learning myself and the self-discovery and learning different cultures. And so if I can find a way to continue to do that in my career by connecting my experiences to another culture, not only do I learn something myself, right, because I'm doing research, but then hopefully I'm presenting to the rest of the world a place where, oh, I didn't realize those connections, or that flavor profile, that technique is just like what I grew up with, and then it's gonna lead to, I guarantee you, asking where does that come from, or with the internet and learning about another culture, right? And so then we get to become closer and closer. So I think hopefully that is moving the needle a little bit, and that's one of my goals, if I can continue to connect different cultures through food.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's really interesting there too is that obviously Asian Americans aren't a monolith, but even between groups of Asian Americans, they're also not monolithic, right? Like my cousin is an Indian bro and he goes to like Indian sports bar restaurants and like, so you can watch football and also eat pizza with sag on it. And it's like, that's also connecting cultures, right? It's connecting cultures of like football guy and Indian American, right? And there's these other things that sort of branch out and make these spaces. And I think the more of these dots that we do connect, right? The more of the like Latino Chinese we do connect, like the closer we get to defining sort of a future where folks can sort of pick and choose what they like and what they know and what, and the pop-up thing too is so fascinating because there's so much space. There's so much space to do a one-day pop-up of one thing that is an exploration of two different cultures coming together. I would love to talk a little bit about how you both classify your own food, Abby, specifically around your cookbook and how getting that published. And because I think it's fascinating. I don't know if you all have seen Abby's book. The signing is tomorrow? Or you said today? Right after this, actually. I knew I had this in my notes. But one of the things that's fascinating about your book, I thought, is like that it got published in the first place. It's brilliant and amazing, but cookbook publishing has never been a place where, a Filipino American dessert book is I was in cookbooks for a bit. That's not a thing. I would love to hear a little bit about how you classify your food and how you sort of got that to happen.
Yeah, I do feel like 3 years ago in 2020, when I was starting to do like the cookbook proposal process, I remember just like, talking to editors and I would get no after no after no because they're like, oh, Filipino food is very niche enough and Filipino American dessert is too niche. And so I got like 2 yeses on my proposal out of like hundreds of no's. And so I really want to be like transparent about that I think that the industry is changing as we speak, but maybe not as fast as I'd like it to. And so I think there was a lot of pressure, and I still feel it sometimes of like, if my book fails, then does that mean that other Filipinos and, Filipino British people, Filipino Australian, and Filipino Americans don't have this opportunity that I get to write this book? And so like, honestly, defining a lot of, I guess what I was trying to do is kind of breaking down what American really is now, because I feel like American to me has always been kind of like a global kind of entity of just so many different communities that make you American. And so that's kind of like the inspiration for so much of the desserts in the book is just, not just drawing from, like apple pie and like red velvet cake that feel very distinctly, I guess, like American, but also, like going, through like Mexican and also like Thai and like different kind of inspirations that really just show that like I did not grow up in a bubble, and we all don't grow up in bubbles and silos, that we all interact with each other day by day. And I think honestly, like having illustrations in my book, my friend Therese Celestial did all my illustrations, that it was honestly just making diagrams and like, this is adobo. You probably had adobo. If you didn't, it's like, soy sauce, garlic, vinegar. And then I'd also just do like an illustration of a chocolate chip cookie, and this is how we're infusing all those flavors into it. And yeah, it's like connecting the dots, like Chef Christine just said, is just you're trying to make things make sense to people that already know what these things are. But now it's like, oh, that clicks, now that makes sense to me as a unit. It is a great opportunity to have had a cookbook and to also just like make these desserts for people. But I just hope more and more Asian Americans get to, because it is really fun to show your cuisine like on a shelf and see a word that you know and your parents know out there. So yeah, thank you for the question.
And I guess this is something that comes up quite a bit, which is that both of your food is very true to both who you are and your lived experiences, which to me means that it's authentic. But what does that mean? Right? And I know, again, that word is a complicated word, right? What happens? The question from the audience is, how do you address an audience who questions the authenticity of your food? Has that happened? Has it been an issue? How do you manage sort of audience expectations of the food that you make?
Happy questions.
I'm sorry, I'm only asking the hardest questions.
Here we go again.
I'm the worst, I'm sorry.
I mean, the easy way to answer that is it's authentically me, right? But we want more than that, right? But it is authentically me. I explained that earlier, I think the goal is honestly, in some ways, is we don't have to question that or have that question, is that you're not questioning, does it taste good? Do you know what I mean? What's the story behind it, right? That would be the nice 1-2 punch, right? As we move forward. But I think it has, I think telling the story is really important. I think that, asking questions, I'm okay with if someone questions it. Do you know what I mean? Sure. Because I know what comes from somewhere and I'm going to answer you, but, like tomorrow, I'm going to do a demo for a dish. I'll give you an example. At Kamika, I'm going to do a demo for a dish called a crispy rice cake lasagna. It is rooted in, I won't give it all away, but it is
best dish.
It is rooted in Korean tteokbokki, all right, and honestly rooted in late night eating in New York City as a line cook, okay, and a line cook on the pasta station cooking, I don't know, thousands of orders of bolognese. All right, so I put them together, and it has kimchi in it because tteokbokki has kimchi in it. And when we opened Kamika, if you came to the restaurant, it's rooted in an Italian restaurant with Japanese techniques. But if you really ate there, you could see a lot of Chinese influence in the food because that's the me part. Mind you, my background is Italian and Japanese food. But so we had to have this debate: are we going to call it kimchi on the menu? And so I lost. I'm going to tell you that.
It said spicy. Right? It doesn't say kimchi in the menu.
It says spicy cabbage. I did come up with that because it was like, well, we're not sure if this should go on the menu with the owners, which is fair. Like I work for somebody else, in that capacity. And I kind of was like, really? Am I going to have to deal with this? Like, I know that kimchi is not Japanese. Thank you. I also know it's not Italian. Thank you very much. Do you know what I mean? But for what it's worth, it's not as simple as that either. Like I lived in Taiwan for the winter, and Taiwan is not huge on super spicy food. So do you know what they've done? They've made their own version of kimchi, and they call it golden kimchi. It's delicious. A coworker of mine's dad was making it, selling it. Like, can I just keep buying like kilos of it at a time? So, that's an evolution of something, right? We talk about like Chinese, Korean, or Korean Chinese food. We talk about Indian Chinese food. Do you know what I mean? We talk about like, right, the congee croquette that you had is rooted off an osopao congee that I ate at Florida Mayo on the Upper West Side. Do you know what I mean? That is an evolution of a dish that Chinese immigrants were taught in Puerto Rico. Do you know what I mean? So if we talk about, it's about telling the story, I think, is where we just have to keep telling the story. And I think we're at a space in our world where people just want to hear the story. So we just have to find the place to do that.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
I'm giving it back to you.
Okay. You warmed me up a bit. I will say that it is hard. I guess the most pushback I usually get is from other Filipinos and generationally older Filipinos who are very much like, this is not how my family would make it, so it's not authentic at all. And so to like deal with that, it's kind of a lot of just like, you know, I do prefer sometimes if you're making something, if there's no reaction, you're just like, meh, this is fine. I'd rather have, you know, polarizing reactions that mean that, you know, you're doing something right if you're kind of shaking the boat and you're rocking the boat. So I do kind of appreciate that there is a sense of like Filipino cuisine, again, is so diverse. And I do like the food that is traditionally made the same way that my parents would make it. At the same time, I think this is like the generational kind of divide of like, okay, but there's also other people making it in different ways that we can all appreciate. And none are better than the other, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I think what is authentic to ourselves is just, you know, we can say that, you know, and be true to that. But then I think people are going to listen and not just jump to the recipe for like a blog post, and will actually read why you made this dish.
Thank you both so much. That was so helpful and wonderful. Can I get a round of applause for the chefs, please?
Thank you.